Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Marc Ashworth, CISO at the First Bank. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. Before we get it too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past theirs. That's where Cyberlinks comes in. We've partnered with the best cybersecurity companies in the world to be able to provide our clients with the best solutions at the best prices. So whether it's managed SIM, SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, you name it, we'll help you find the best solution at the best price. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Marc, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about First Bank and your role there as CISO?
Sure. So First Bank, we're based out of Creve Coeur, Missouri. So it's part of the St. Louis area. And we're a fourth generation bank, family owned, and we're in around 6 states between retail branches and then mortgage and commercial lending sites. We have, I think, roughly 80 some odd retail and about another 10 to 15 other locations throughout the six states, with half the business being out in California, the other half in the Midwest area. And then as far as my role, I as the Chief Information Security Officer, I have 4 groups that report to me. I have networking, physical security, financial crimes, and then, of course, the information security team or cyber team. So.
Nice. All right. Well, I got to ask, you got a financial crimes team. That sounds fascinating. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So this team is very busy. I'll say that because they're the ones that are looking for various types of fraud transactions that are coming through. Now, this is separate from anti-money laundering. That's a different group that doesn't report to me. But they're the ones that's looking at the, any sort of fraudulent checks or, invalid ACHs or wires or those sort of things, and then working with the other banks and the customers, and then the locations in order to mitigate the risk that's associated with the bank, or to help educate a customer that they're being a victim of a romance scam of some sort or something along that line, to try to convince them not to wire that money to the person down the street, which is actually in India or something like that, or not, or Nigeria or someplace like that. So,
right.
So very, very stressful job, but they do an excellent job to keep the bank and our customers safe.
That's really cool. So something like that seems to me like it would be, a perfect place for AI to help and assist. Are there, is that something where there's a lot of great tools for that already that AI is using to help sift through all the transactions and help identify them, or is it still largely a kind of a human manual process at this point?
No, there's quite a few of the major fraud-related tools out there that uses some sort of machine learning AI that's associated with it to help, go through those vast amounts of data, look for those anomalies, and then pull those out. It's really a combination, I think, between rules, machine learning, and maybe AI. There's that fine line between really machine learning and AI off of there, and so our tools that we use, and I won't mention what they are, but they do utilize all those sort of analysis components to try to find those anomalies and alert those to the AML and fraud teams. So.
Nice. Well, I'm going to ask you a crazy question that I know, your crystal ball is probably as good as anybody else's, but do you see AI, being one of these things that in the financial sector and banking, especially when you're talking about, this side of banking, do you see it being something that is ultimately going to kind of And I'm not sure that you can win the war on financial crimes when it comes to, these kinds of fraudsters. But do you think it's something where we stand a fighting chance, or that there's just so much money and so much incentive for the criminals that they're never going to stop, and we're never really going to be able to shut it down 100%?
Yeah, AI will be just another tool in the arsenal to help detect this. But, frankly, the bad guys are using AI in one form or another, or, in order to either better refine their tactics for the scams themselves. The check washing and everything is getting better and better. The duplicate checks and all those sort of things because of mail fraud, all those sort of things is going to continue. AI might help with that detection of that a little bit better, but in reality, it's this has been going on for centuries, right? So any place where there's money, there's going to be fraud that's going to try to get it. And so it's just a matter of the tactics are going to shift, and the good guys have to shift their tactics to be able to better detect what the bad guys are doing. So it's always a cat and mouse chase, and I think it will always continue to be that way. It's going to get more and more complicated, and it's going to just happen faster and more subtle. And so looking for those subtleties is going to become more and more difficult, I do think, as time progresses.
I was kind of surprised to hear you mention, check washing it, and I'm assuming that that's a fairly significant part of it, currently, from the way that you're talking about it. So, for those that aren't really familiar with it, can you kind of give a breakdown of what, check washing is, and how it's currently being used? And yeah, yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, basically, it is taking a stolen check and uh, that is addressed to someone, and washing either the name of it off or the dollar amount, and then keeping the signature of the account holder on there, but changing some other parameter to either make the check a larger dollar amount, and then a lot of times they're duplicating it as well, and then trying to pass those duplicate checks under paper stock or something, standard paper stock or something, in order to try to get that transaction to take place, and then either cash that or do a deposit and then try to remove that money out of that account as quickly as possible. So you see it happening quite a lot. Mail fraud is probably the biggest way of doing that. So they're basically looking for checks in the mail and stealing those checks and doing that. There's been uh, several cases where the postal service has arrested someone that's been an inside job doing it, but then it's just as frequent that those drop locations for mail drops are being broken into, and those type of checks and stuff are being stolen and then redone.
Wow. And this is all like, for the standard consumer. We're not even talking about commercial, right? I'm assuming it would be less, on the commercial side, and this is more on the consumer side.
It can really be both. Treasury checks are also a big victim of that. I say victim, but target, I guess, of that type of theft. But yeah, consumer, it happens a lot there, but it does happen on commercial. There's the bigger companies are using ACH transactions in order to pay their bills online in order to receive payments, but smaller companies still write a lot of checks, and so those are being stolen, and some zeros adding to a transaction, and then attempted to be deposited, and get that money out as quickly as possible.
Wild. Well, not to make this all about check fraud, but I just think that that's it's just such an interesting thing, right? And
Yeah.
so, and it affects so many people. I had just heard it was some staggering number, the number of people that are, and it really becomes more of a senior issue. The senior citizens are are targeted so heavily and they fall victim to these financial crimes so, so frequently. The numbers, I don't know, it was somewhere like $40 billion last year that was reported to the FBI. And so that number's way higher because a lot of people end up, not even reporting, financial crimes. So it'd be really interesting to see what the actual number is that's
Mhm.
that's being, stolen every year. It's crazy. Absolutely
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at the overall numbers or estimated numbers of cybercrime, which includes these BEC scams in general, where,
Hmm.
romance and however that money is being transferred, it is, now in 2025, if you think of a global economy, it is the third largest economy right now, uh, second only to China and then the United States. So, it surpassed Japan and Germany last year with the amount of money that's being stolen and the whole cyber security or cyber fraud type of, all that crime in general it's just massive, the amount of money that's being stolen and or money that's involved with trying to protect against it. So it's a huge business, and it's sad that it's that way. So
Wow. That's mind blowing. I hadn't heard that, and that's incredible.
yeah,
Jeez. Okay. Well, I guess it does warrant a discussion then. I mean, if it's that
yeah.
big, that's
and
insane.
and that's not just the check
Yeah,
fraud and all that other
sure.
stuff.
But all of it.
That's if you look at some of these cryptocurrency exchanges, that the losses are there. I mean, they're in the hundreds
Oh
of
yeah.
millions of losses almost every time you see it. So and there's usually several of them a year. So you add that on top of it. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm still surprised that they allow you to pump and dump, some coin that you launch. Like, really? How is
Yeah.
it? I'm not one for, massive regulation and but this is clearly, a financial crime and something that should be somewhat regulated because there are just too many people losing too much money, in that. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's nuts. Okay, so let's bring it back to the whole CISO thing. So how did you, it's funny because we've had so many people on the show, and I don't think any two have had the same path to CISO or to CIO. So, can you tell us kind of your origin story, how you got, interested in I suppose technology or in the security, and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I've been interested in tech since I was a kid, and it all started from I grew up in the 80s, and there was a movie called War Games that came out,
Yep.
and that's what I was like, I want to do that. And so that's where I got interested, and I started development there and got my degree in computer information systems, which was the business side of computer science because I didn't want to take calculus. So I went the other route, and so I did programming from out of college back in the early '90s, and more on the mid range and mainframe side, and got into some PC development and networking, and because I was at smaller shops, so you kind of did a little bit of everything, PC support, and the early days of email and Novell networks and all that, and around 2000, after all my Y2K projects, I switched over to being more full time around the networking side of things. And then I was consulting. And so we got into security pen testing and auditing. And so I did a lot of that. And then I pivoted over and became the equivalent of the CIO for a large healthcare group. They didn't have CIO, but it was director position. But so I did that for quite a few years, and which was part of a large expansion. So I really got to learn about M&A and everything very heavily. And then went into manufacturing for a client that I had consulted for in the past. And so I was in aerospace manufacturing for a while. And then from there, I went into banking up into to the time of this position, I'd always been like a technical manager. So I was doing everything from strategy, talking to the board or the ownership, to staying up 2 a.m. doing updates on a server. So, or, replacing the network. And I got a very broad background on technology stack between development, infrastructure, and then strategy. And so when I came to First Bank, this was kind of a good fit because I'd been doing a lot of security. I got my security certs. I was one of the first in Missouri to get CISSP back in the early 2000s. And I let it go because it was hard to get CPEs back then. Don't ever do that. That's the worst test to try to redo again. And so before I came to the bank, I got all my certs back up, and then really wanted to just dive into security. And so First Bank gave me the opportunity, and what better place to be a CISO than in finance, because that's where the money is, right? And that's where all the bad guys want to go. So.
Yeah, no, it really is. And that's, I think, more so than I think really any industry, that is the one that is most under attack. So it really is kind of tip of the spear, a frontline kind of work, which I think is really fascinating. And being an old Army guy, I think that a lot of people don't really think of it in those terms. But it 100% is that you're on the battlefield every day, keeping people, safe and protected. And I think it's easy for people not to kind of see that or feel that way when they're like, just showing up. But no, there's a battle raging, for, billions, if not trillions of dollars a year. And
Mhm.
and you're right there on the forefront of it. So let me ask you. So when you go in, do you feel that way? You feel like you're fighting the good fight? Is it like war games?
Uh, well, obviously, we're not trying to launch nuclear missiles or anything like that, like or on that, or different
Right.
scenarios for that. But it is security in general, I think, is just very exciting because it changes so rapidly. And it hits more than just the technology side of things. There's processes and procedures of what people are doing, how they're interacting, and then you have the legal ramifications, the regulations and everything, privacy and all that, vendor assessments, third party risk assessments, and all that's on there. Not just, okay, here's a server or here's that. So it's so much more than just IT. And that, I think, is what really makes it exciting. And then being that I also have, and gosh, probably for last 15 plus years, I've always been involved on the physical security side too. So I've always overseen that. So, having to worry about alarms and cameras and badge access and how that's all working and integrating, and then, and like we were talking with the financial crimes, is a whole new avenue. But it's just constantly something is always going on, and something that you always have to worry about. And then, how are you affecting training of your staff and the rest of the organization, the executives, and then dealing with the strategy of it, worry about, okay, the bank or the business is going this way, IT is going this way, and so how are you wrapping your strategy around there to make sure that we're moving the positive way securely, and not trying to be the least amount of resistance to keep the business from moving forward as much as possible. And I think that's the fun and the challenging part of it. And then budgeting and all that stuff. I love the budgeting component of it. I'm not a finance guy, but I love dealing with that, or contracts and those sort of things. And so it's all exciting to me. So.
Sounds like you were made for it. Let me ask you. So you named a bunch of interesting parts, but what is your favorite part of kind of now that you're CISO? Because I think a lot of people would hear that and Now, maybe not a lot of people who are listening to this, because I think a lot of people who listen to this are really into this kind of stuff anyways. But I think that someone in general may hear stuff like that, like, budgeting, and they think, oh, accounting stuff, and they don't get excited. Kind of like the idea of learning calculus for you was like, no, I'm gonna avoid that. No, thanks. Right.
That's right.
So what are the things what's your kind of your favorite part that really, kind of drives you every day that you get excited about and keeps you excited when you wake up?
Yeah, well, I can tell you it is not necessarily the budgeting part that makes me excited, but I do like doing that part of it. But the for me, it is, looking at what's happening in the real world outside of the organization, and then how is that affecting the cyber side of things, or the crime, or even fraud in general. But and then looking at our dashboards and being able to see, okay, this is happening here. Okay, well, we're seeing more things happening over here. So let's look at that. Let's focus in on that. And so that whole threat intelligence component of it, and tying that into the business, and where we need to adjust on a regular basis, some of our focus to make sure that we're not seeing any sort of indicators or anything like that that's happening. A fun story that I like to talk about is right before the Ukraine war started, when Russia first did that invasion. We've been monitoring our firewalls and everything for activity, and Russia was always up, fairly high, doing the scanning of our data centers. Well, 2 days before the invasion, they dropped off to almost nothing. And it's like something's going on here, it's like. And so what we suspected was they shifted their cyber forces all to Ukraine at that time.
Yeah.
And then the invasion occurred, and then slowly over the next month they started to ramp back up again to uh, you know pre-invasion levels. And so it was interesting watching that. And then during other main movements in that early part of their war, we were seeing dips like that was occurring a couple of days before it would happen. And so it was kind of interesting to see that. Or when Pelosi went to Taiwan, we saw a huge shift in Chinese activity where it was, just skyrocketed above Russian levels. And so that was unusual activity that was off of there, so they were really trying to hit back after to kind of protest on the cyber side of her going there. So, those sort of events is very interesting, and correlating that from what we're seeing on the threat intelligence side, or increases in spam email or something along that line as well. But just general scans for them looking at your systems in order to try to see if they can get their way in quicker. That's really kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And the interesting part is I don't think people are really, kind of aware of just how much it's these nation states kind of doing this. This isn't just some kid in his mom's basement, who happens to be in China or Russia, who's going after these. There are some of those, right,
Mhm.
in some countries, but a lot of this is nation state, funded and educated and directed. And I
Mhm.
think, that's a really great example that, both from Russia and from China, to coincide with the geopolitical activity.
Mhm.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, do you see that stuff, I mean, all the time? Is it mostly kind of nation state stuff that you're seeing?
Uh, no, not necessarily. I mean, there's so much just background radiation that's occurring on the
Yeah.
internet in general. So, there's those big events like that you see you can kind of after the fact go back and kind of correlate what's
Right.
going on. Or if you kind of know that it's happening, you can kind of watch and see, but it's a lagging indicator more so than anything. Um, but it's yeah, it's not just nation states, because you're getting a lot of the I think a lot of the phishing or is more of the organized crime type of things that's occurring, and that's a huge part of it all. And or sympathizers or something along that line of you know some other, nation or something along that line, so it varies, but I think it kind of depends on the attack vector that you're going to see more organized crime handling one side. There will be, you know, nation state that might be involved there, but you see a lot of Russian activity happening on the social media front and for false information, that sort of things. And China has gotten really good over the past year about this too. I had in my own podcast, we've had a conversation with a former FBI agent, and he was talking about that too. That China over, very quickly over the last 2 years, especially the past year, has really accelerated their capabilities on that false information, whereas the Russians and the U.S. for that matter have been very good at it for a very long time. So it's just they're being quicker to shift those platforms a little bit faster than maybe what the Chinese have tried to do in the past.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it, so let's take a minute to explore your podcast. Let's plug it. What's your podcast and what do you guys focus on?
Yeah, so I have a, kind of a similar title. Mine's the Cyber Executive, and so we hit all different types of things. We do talk some cyber, but we've talked a lot of leadership. We've talked some technology, mentorship, planning for um, oh, on blank of like for staffing and that sort of
Hmm.
things. And then and we also kind of this past month did some things on health and stress management and everything as well, because
Nice.
that's huge in the cyber. You hear about burnout all the time and stress and technology. And so we had um, some experts in diet and fitness to come on and talk about that, and so it's kind of wherever we kind of feel that kind of a need is, we're kind of talking about it. It's not just all about technology, so which has kind of really made it fun. So that's my plug of the Cyber Executive. So I appreciate that.
I
So
love it, of course. So what was the inspiration and when did you start?
So I started in February was when the first episode, but I've just had a lot of people. I do a lot of public speaking, and I had a lot of people. Hey, you ought to start your own podcast. We'd really love to, hear that. And I heard that for a couple years, and finally I heard it again in last fall, and was like, okay, I think I'll go ahead and do it. Let me see what it's going to take, and so I'm having fun with it, and it's just kind of me and a bunch of my either CISO friends or other contacts, and just bringing them in. I'm trying to bring, much like yourself, thought leaders, CEOs, people from the C-suite or whatever. And it's been a lot of fun. So I've had a Olympic medalists in there talking about leadership and team building, and
Nice.
as well as other type of people. So it's been
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, no, it's really a blast. I was surprised because when I started, a buddy of mine had started it, and he's a business broker, right? Does merger and acquisition stuff, and he's like, hey, I'm Matt. I'm starting a podcast. You should too. I'm like, Todd, I'm not really on the sexy side of tech here. I'm not sure. It's not like it's Apple with a new iPhone,
Yeah.
and he's like, agree to disagree. Now his podcast is really cool. It's the Second Bite podcast, and it basically brings you into the room and you get to understand how these deals are made, so I think for anybody who's looking to who's got a business, it's a great way to kind of learn about ways to sell your business and what you might kind of things to consider when exiting, much earlier on. So it's really cool podcast. And
Very cool.
he goes like a couple years go by, and he's like his business is just booming from it. I think it like quadrupled just from doing this podcast, and he's having a great time doing it. I'm like, all right, tell me more about this podcast idea, because it turns out that it was just so much fun. We were trying to do what were we doing? Like one episode, kind of a week was kind of our goal, right, in the first year, and and at first it was a real struggle to kind of to just put in the time to get all the guests and then do it, And of course, I don't think I've ever taken a good photo and I can't stand, kind of seeing myself on video. So getting through that head trash that was a tough one for me. Like it took me a
Yeah.
while to finally get through it. I think maybe a year and a half or so before I could finally like, even catch a glimpse of the me on video. How about you? Did you have any of that sort of I don't know, hesitation or that sort of head trash of like, oh, can't stand, hearing myself talk?
Uh, Probably not because I've been doing these and virtual webinars and public speaking for 5 years or more, so I've kind of gotten used to what I think my voice sounds like versus what it sounds like over the thing. Although I was playing it for my son, he goes, "Oh, I wouldn't have noticed that was you." He goes, "That doesn't sound anything like you." And it's like, okay, well, at least I know it's something with the audio. So maybe it's not what I think my head, sounds like. So but no, I really hasn't bothered me. But like when I'm doing the editing and everything, I don't look at me. I'm looking at the other person and kind of
Yeah.
what they're doing, and hoping that everything is going well. And I just assume if I got a goofy look, I got a goofy look. So I don't really mind. It's what adds the personal character to it, right? Is
That's right.
how you act or smile or look and all the other
Yeah.
things. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, congratulations. So you started in February. What's your kind of release schedule? Are you a monthly, weekly? What are you shooting for?
I try for weekly. That's I think the hardest part is trying to balance, my schedule with, since I'm having, executives on there to balance their schedules. And so, I got one other in the queue right now. I'm getting a little nervous, on getting someone else off of it and in between now and next week's release. So, but I try to get two or three at least stocked up, but then I'll get it stocked up and then it goes through really quickly. So the hardest part I think is really getting people's schedules. I got 4 or 5 people in the works, but trying to align their schedules and that sort of things is always a challenge. And
Yeah.
so that's to me, that's the hardest. I don't know about you and what your experience is.
Yeah, that was when I first started and I was doing that myself, it was a real challenge. Like that was the toughest part. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, I gotta outsource, I gotta have somebody else doing the scheduling. So I kind of we put together we used HubSpot and so we did a calendar link in HubSpot and I got somebody, to on the team to just do that,
Mhm.
find people to good people to bring on the podcast. And that's kind of been a godsend for me because that took that off of my plate. And now my problem is he's really good at his job. And so it's like, some days I'll have 2 or 3 podcasts because I'm like, dude, I've got a day job. This is not my only job. I'm not just full-time
Yeah,
podcast host. So that was a real challenge, but that was my breakthrough was like get
yeah,
somebody else to, kind of find the guests and get them scheduled. And that was good because then it's just go and have the interview and then I've got somebody else doing the editing and everything. So I've outsourced most of it to other people and all I've got to do is come here and have a nice conversation. So
yeah.
I've kind of stolen the best part for myself and let everybody else do all the grunt work is what
Yeah.
it is. So
Well, I hope to get that point. So we'll see on how this all lasts and that sort of things. And maybe if I get to the point where I'm gonna go and start soliciting sponsors or something, I
yeah,
can pay a little bit for someone to do some of that. So
yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well,
So
congratulations, because getting
thank
past the
you.
first like 10, statistically, it's not very likely. It's some that what is it? Like 99% of podcasts have fewer than ten
Yeah.
episodes. It's some huge percentage. So you're one of the very few that have made it past that
Yeah.
10. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this upcoming week will be 18. So we'll see on where it keeps going. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's no small feat. It's funny.
No, it's not.
I forget who I was talking to just the other day. I had a guest on, and they were talking about that their company they started a podcast, and they're on their 30th episode, and they're exhausted. Like they're
Yeah.
like, I don't know how you do it, man, because they have a whole team that they're doing it, and they're exhausted from 30 episodes. I'm like. Well, good. I don't feel so bad now.
Yeah,
It's not that I feel bad about it, but it was nice to know that you know, um, that it's an
it's a lot
effort
of
for
work.
everybody. It's a lot of
Yeah,
work.
it's a lot of work. And the editing, if you get a nice clean podcast where you don't really have to edit much and you can just publish it, those are the great ones. But like my last one, I think I restarted it twice because I kept flipping up my own intro. It's like, oh my goodness, it's like this never happens, and here I am. And so you never know what's going to happen. And I started off trying to edit out the ums and all that sort of
Yeah.
things, and it's like, no,
Nope.
that's just the character of live discussion, right? So
Yeah.
and it was starting to sound real choppy. Videos, and I was like, okay, this is too advanced for me. I'm not doing that,
Yeah.
and we'll just
Yep.
go.
I would say when it comes to the ums, yeah, I think that was one for me too. I think everybody's like, should I? Um, and then I think that it's in the transcript, that's a great place to take out the ums and the ahs.
Mhm.
Because some people, my wife being the I think she's the president of the of the fan club that will not watch the episode but reads. She's like a super reader, freaking nerd.
Yeah,
But she will read it. She'll read the transcript, but she won't watch the video. And so I think for a lot of people, it's having that if you're doing the transcript part, then that's a great place to take out the ums
yeah,
and the ahs. But yeah, that's tough to
yeah.
take it out of the video. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I noticed I started saying, as I'm talking off of this. And I was like, where did that come from? I go from to So I don't know. But it's
Yeah.
amazing how your habits will change because you focus on one thing to try not to do and to be a better speaker and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I know we're totally diverting from your topic here. So this is
No, this is awesome.
a
It's
great, great
because
conversation for anyone that wants to start a podcast. It is not easy, folks. There's a lot of
yeah.
work to it. So
Yep. And I think I don't know that it's a cautionary tale, but I think it's something good to talk about. It's like
yeah.
when people are thinking about having kids, all they hear is like, "Oh, you're gonna love it. It's gonna be great." Really? You're not gonna sleep for 3 years, and then
That's
and then you have a lifelong responsibility. They don't leave when it's not over when they're 18. It's not an 18-year
no.
response. So,
Yeah.
you
You
know,
always worry about him. My oldest is 21. I still worry about him all the time. So
yeah.
yeah.
And when he's 41, you're still going to be, worried
Yeah.
about him and stuff. So it's yeah, so no, we're here telling people the truth, letting it be known. It's not all easy work. It's not all
Yeah.
rainbows and lollipops out there in
Yeah.
podcast land.
Yeah. It's the Cyber Truth podcast here today.
That's
That's
what
what
it
it
is.
is. That's what it is.
That's the title of this episode, the Cyber
Yeah.
Truth Podcast.
There you go.
That's awesome. Well, what, Mark, I think this has been such a great time, and I think we could now, go on and on indefinitely, as
Yeah.
with when it comes to security and IT and podcasts. I think we've got a lot in common. And War Games, that was such a
Yeah.
great movie, by the way.
Oh, it
I think,
was.
and as you mentioned that, I was like, I actually think that was what got me into tech as well. I mean, my dad designed electronic circuit boards growing up, and he brought back, the first like computer, and it was this, IBM 8088 that booted into
Mhm.
BASIC, and if you wanted to do anything, you had to read the manual for BASIC that came with it. So that's when I started programming. And but War Games came out before that, and I
Yeah.
saw that, and I think, and that was really one of those movies where it was just, it was really transformative for me. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that I love that stuff. So that
Yeah.
and I think Max Headroom. Did you ever see
Yeah.
that show,
Yeah.
Max Headroom?
Yeah. Which
That
came quite a bit later, but
quite a
yeah.
bit later. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. That one I think was also very very much for that. Oh, I can't wait to even thinking about it. Back in those days, so you're trying to think of how do you program like simple graphics. It was a real challenge. Like,
Mhm.
especially when you're starting out with, back in those early days, graphics was tough, right? And then you're doing stuff and you see stuff like Max Headroom, you're like, that's crazy.
Mhm.
And then just the other day, we're driving down the road and the car is driving itself, and we're on a video call. And I'm like, yeah, we're living in the future. Now we've got
Right.
cars that drive themselves, and we're on a portable phone, talking. And that it was mind blowing back
Yeah.
in those days to even follow where a ball was going on a screen was insane, or to make it bounce and make
Yeah.
any sort of physical sense was crazy stuff.
Yeah,
And
and
now,
it was in basic, so
yeah,
basic programming language, and so it was a lot of code to do very little back then, and when you're having to save it on a 5 1/4 floppy disk because
right,
the hard drives were the size of a data center, and that was all it was in the time, back in the mid 80s. I guess it was probably about 82, 83 when I started developing on an Apple II, and so, or 2E, and and it took a lot. I spent a lot of time, and I learned very much very quickly on saving your work, because I spent about 6 hours coding and forgot to save my work and was like, oh, I'm tired, go to sleep, turn it off. And as soon as I hit the button, I was like, no.
Yeah.
So,
It's funny because, we have at Cyberlinks where we started out as an MSP, and we're helping, well, actually, but it was before MSP days, as an IT company helping small businesses with their IT. And it's funny how many people you end up helping learn that lesson. Like they call it, like, oh, I forgot to save. Like, really? You forgot to save? And it always reminds me, going back to those early days, like we learned that lesson once, right? Like, and
yeah,
it's a painful lesson. You've spent
yeah,
hours, coding, and then you didn't save. And so from that point on, you save, and you save frequently, and you
that's
save
right.
backups, and you're using multiple disks to save because one of your disks, got too close to a speaker, and now it's all your data was wiped off of there. So you're
Right.
saving constantly. And so it always boggles my mind that still to this day there are people today learning that very difficult lesson of save and save often. So
Yeah. Yeah. I
it's
agree.
it's too fun.
Some
Uh,
things never change, right? So,
no, they really don't. No, the technology gets more advanced, but the simple lessons are still all right there. Yep,
yeah,
save and save often.
basics
Uh,
are basics for a reason.
that's exactly right. That's so true. Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This has been a real blast and a real treat. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about First Bank?
Sure. So you can learn more about First Bank at first.bank. And that'll take you to our website. And then if you want to learn more about me, I'm on LinkedIn. So you feel free to reach out or follow or connect with me there on LinkedIn.
Great, and we'll be sure to also link to the Cyber Executive podcast, and
Yeah.
we'll get that in there as well. So, well, thanks again, Mark, and until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.